Hello viewers and welcome to another Warhammer 40,000 Conquest video production. My name is Mitch and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today I'm pleased to present you with an overview and my first impressions of the latest preview article published by Fantasy Flight Games entitled Enslave the Masses, which grants us another look into the second war pack of the Planetfall cycle of war packs, Boundless Hate. But before we take a look at our latest new cards, keep in mind that though this article does provide us with several intriguing new spoilers, I'm going to stick to a cursory overview only, and intend merely to share my first thoughts and initial impressions of all of these cards, because, as we've already seen the retail release of the first of our Planetfall cycle of war packs, Decree of Ruin, it won't be long before I'm reviewing Boundless Hate as an expansion in its entirety. Plus, although we've seen all of the Dark Eldar faction cards which stand to be made available between now and the eventual retail release of our newly spoiled Warlords associated war pack, we still undoubtedly stand to receive a great many more synergistic cards, as of yet still unspoiled, for our new Warlord over the course of our cycle's 4 remaining war packs, and therefore much of the true potential that these cards were designed with in mind remains entirely yet to be seen. So, considering that qualifier, let's nevertheless evaluate our latest article for each and every scrap of information possible, and remember that I'll be covering each of the cards included in this war pack in a much more thorough, far more exhaustive manner at a somewhat later date after its official release. But with our introduction aside, let's take a look at our newest Warlord, the leader of the Shadowed Thorns Cabal and last of our Planetfall cycle Warlords to be fully unveiled. We have the unique unit Archon, Selain Mour. She has a starting hand size of 7 with 7 starting resources. She possesses an attack value of 2 as well as 7 printed hit points. She has the Warrior and Archon traits and reads Reaction. After a Cabalite or Raider unit enters play under your control at a material type planet, red, gain 1 resource token, limit once per phase. So, this is a third Dark Eldar Warlord option which rewards players for playing Cabalite and Raider trait units, albeit her ability is limited to only once per phase and occurs only when these units interplay at a red material type planet. But, presuming you do meet those requirements, you're refunded 1 resource after you pay for that unit, which does necessitate your ability to invest the finances up front in order to be able to do so. So during the deploy phase, you might invest a resource into a unit eligible to trigger our Archon's ability, and then, after playing it, you essentially regain that resource. We clearly see that her signature army unit is a Cabalite with Ambush, which means that you can not only benefit from her ability during the deploy phase, but that you're also allowed to regain an invested resource during combat. And if someday we see a possible means of putting units into play during the command and or headquarters phases, then those options also become available to you. Just keep in mind that at present, we have scarcely few eligible units with which to put into play, and you only derive benefit from this ability when putting units out to red material type planets. So, though unlike Packmaster Kith, our Archon does not generate any free dangerous token units, she still stands to be more efficient than our Packmaster with the resources she receives, and though she doesn't have the benefit of something akin to Urian Rakarth's torture event specific discount, neither does she suffer his cost penalty for playing any other kind of conventional Dark Eldar event, which affords her a reasonable swath of options with which to back up her Raiders and Cabalites. Plus, as a unit herself, she hits respectably really hard at 2 and does possess a considerable pool of hit points, making her the most durable Dark Eldar Warlord printed thus far. But without being able to output the same volume of damage as Kith and her associated tokens, the Archon will definitely be reliant on other card effects for backup, though you definitely will want her involved in combat, presumably as often as possible. But when it does come to deck options, that's where I take a moment to pause in evaluating this Warlord, because of all extant Kabalites and Raiders, there at present exist only a total of 4, and of these, only one of them often sees play, and even that isn't exactly a consistent sight on the tabletop. Plus, in assessing these units, we see a distinct trend among Kabalites. Beyond being cheap and fragile, they possess not even a single command icon between the 3 of them. At present, we have the Kabalite Halfborn, a 1-cost 1/1 unit who lets you draw a card when it leaves play, or, for the same number of resources, we also have the Sybarite Marksman, a 2/1 with ranged. Or, at the cost of 2 resources, we see the Kabalite Strike Force, a 2-attack, 2 HP unit with area effect 1, which is definitely a keyword highly desirable in our current high unit volume meta. And of these 3 Kabalites, that last contender might well end up being the most competitive option. Ranged keyword units, of course, are far from undesirable, but considering our marksman's printed attack value of 2, and that the Dark Eldar don't have access to nearly the range of attachments that the Tau possess, with which to transform any ranged unit into a possible powerhouse, unless you're interested in investing an additional card and resource into the Bladed Lotus Rifle, an attachment which could transform your marksman into a 3-value attacker, or otherwise perhaps you could pay for some rune-encrusted armor to elevate that same attack value to 4, albeit in that case at the cost of 2 cards and 3 resources with or without, one being eventually refunded, then this army unit may not provide anything more than chip damage. But in turning instead to assess the Raider trait, we stand to see only one available option upon the release of Boundless Hate. It's the Hellion Gang, which for 2 resources is a 2/2 with flying. So it tends to perform very well against 2 or less attack value enemy units, and at a mere cost of 1, if deployed to a red material icon planet, this could potentially be your most desirable option. It even has the command icon that the Kabalites lack. It is worth noting that we've seen the Flayed Skull Slaver previously spoiled, which, despite being a powerful contender for Archon Selain Mour deck inclusion, will not see release until our 6th and final war pack of the Planetfall cycle. But all the same, as a 1-command, 2-attack, 3-hit point unit, which can essentially be played out for 2 resources, and which stands to provide a 2-resource token bonus when it sits upon a red material type planet, it will undoubtedly prove an enormously appealing option for our Archon. And while players bemoan that they received myriad torture synergy cards prior to the release of Urian Rakarth, the second Dark Eldar Warlord, I can't help but feel as though the opposite may be true in this case, that players will receive the Archon, find her initially underwhelming, but then, over the course of the cycle, she'll eventually receive enough additional support cards to adjust her power tier relative to existing warlords to something far more reasonable. So overall, she's at a bit of a loss for existing, appealing, non-signature desirable trait unit options, but if she does afford you the ability to regain several spent resource tokens throughout the course of a game, then you might be able to fund multiple supplemental powerful Dark Eldar and allied faction card effects, things along the lines of Dark Eldar staples such as Archon's Terror and Klavex Warleader, but certainly not excluding any number of other possible effects. The conventional Dark Eldar playstyle is to facilitate an overwhelming card choke, or otherwise perhaps simply to attempt to starve your opponent of resources, and while Archon Selain Mour can still try to do so, it seems as if she'll be standing to establish a strong economy of her own from her presence at red planets, plus whatever you decide to do to your opponent financially. I also think it's certainly worth remembering that she's a fairly reasonable unit by herself, with that large pool of hit points and moderate attack value, and considering also that Iridial is a red planet which might serve well to purge her of damage, and that Taurus is also a red planet which might yield a veritable bounty of wealth to her. Overall, I'm definitely very curious to see what happens next with this Warlord. But no one Warlord can truly stand alone, and therefore let us also assess her signature squad. First, we see a conventional 4 copies of the Shadowed Thorns pillagers. They have a cost of 2 resources and do possess 1 command icon. They have an attack value of 2 as well as 2 hit points. They have the Warrior, Raider, and Kabbalite traits as well as the Ambush keyword. So, there's not really that much to say about this unit. You can deploy them as you would any other unit, and they could contribute to winning command struggles, or instead, you could ambush them into play during the combat phase, anytime that you'd like, and at any planet you'd like, though they will only refund 1 resource if their deployment occurs at a red material type planet. Ambush units are always valuable, and though they don't do nearly as much damage as would a Clavex War Leader, at a possible cost of 1/4 the resources, it's hard to say no to an opportunistic attack value of 2. If your opponent leaves their Warlord exhausted, or somehow overextends their standing army, or an opportunity to lash out and inflict some timely punishment simply presents itself, then by all means play out any one of your 4 copies of this unit. It's formidable enough to survive incidental damage, and after being ambushed, when left sitting at a planet, it contributes to the subsequent round's command phase, with an additional resource and investment of a card. For a possible total of 2 resources spent, the Bladed Lotus Rifle will stand to make this a 3-attack ranged unit. So, while there isn't really anything remarkable about the Shadowed Thorns pillagers, it's basically everything our Archon could hope for when it comes to a signature army. But next in our signature squad, we see our attachment, Last Breath, a unique card with a cost of 1, 3 printed shield icons, and the relic, war gear, and weapon traits. It reads limit 1 relic per player, attached to a unique unit. Reaction: after attached unit damages an army unit by an attack, the attacked unit gets -3 attack until the end of the phase. So this is a fascinating attachment. Though it doesn't outright destroy enemy units, it can nevertheless afford you a sterling opportunity to win protracted combats by essentially removing enemy army units one at a time from the equation of combat. So long as you can deal at least 1 point of damage with the attached unit's attack, each army unit you strike receives a cumulative -3 attack value that persists until the end of the phase. Perhaps a Blood Angel's Veterans is no longer able to deal any damage whatsoever, and therefore your other units can opt to concentrate their own attacks upon far more vulnerable targets. Granted, those debuffed enemy units do still have the opportunity to retreat at the end of a given combat round, but if they can't kill off your units, then they're entirely unable to win battles, and if any weakened units are forced to run away from you, only to return to a planet, commit alongside their Warlord during the following round's command phase, exhausted, then slowly but surely, this attachment could make a tremendous bit of difference when it comes to whittling away your enemy's hopes of victory. Units that are unable to defend themselves, whether by merit of attack value reduction reduction or simply by beginning combat exhausted are easy prey for you in either case, and if you always prioritize debuffing ready units over those already exhausted, then through attrition you could easily stand to win conflict after conflict, with your opponent having little hope to successfully stand against you. You just definitely want to be certain that, if playing against this attachment, you make sure to shield against it by almost any means possible, because though Archon Selain Mour herself only threatens a mere 2 damage, this attachment will quickly make enemy units worthless, and if she is allowed to damage the same unit multiple times, even something with a very high attack value can be reduced to 0 in no more than a few rounds of combat at most. Plus, it's also worth remembering that because that weakening of an enemy unit does persist until the very end of the phase, if at some point said unit ends up leaving your planet, only to participate in a subsequent battle, that debuff nevertheless does continue to persist. So, perhaps unappealing at first, but still an attachment that is deceptively enormously powerful, and as it seems that our Archon's playstyle is going to focus heavily on economic discrepancy, this attachment, especially when affixed to such a durable Warlord, or perhaps the attack-punishing Solarite Vetus, could easily end up proving to be of impeccable value. So there may well come a day when Last Breath has competition for one's Dark Eldar relic slot, but at the moment, unless you absolutely must use this attachment as shields, I certainly recommend playing it out as quickly as possible, because whether you're able to effectively negate enemy army units entirely, or you're simply saving yourself from having to discard a significant number of shield cards, this attachment seems relatively superb. It even works around myriad enemy card effects which, like Last Breath itself, necessitate successfully dealing attack damage before triggering their effect. So, in a word, this attachment looks fantastic. But also included in our signature squad, we of course see a support, the unique Nexus of Shadows, with a cost of 1 and the location trait. It reads Action. Pay 2 resources to draw 1 card, limit once per phase. So, Archon Selain Mour is likely to harvest a reasonable number of refunded resources, thanks to her ability, and this support provides a convenient means of spending those. If you ever find yourself at a tremendous surplus of resource tokens, you can simply invest 2, and without exhausting the support, fetch yourself an additional card. It can be used to stall, once during the deploy phase, and if you truly need to dig through your deck for a specific card in particular, one that could potentially make all the difference during a pivotal game-deciding moment, then this could afford you a reasonable opportunity to do so. It's by no means guaranteed that you'll find what you're looking for, and it does become expensive relatively quickly, but again, you need only use this support when you can afford to do so. And if at some point resources no longer do pose an obstacle to you, you could potentially trigger the support up to 4 times during any given round, though if you have that many resources to spare, you're probably likely to be winning anyways, or simply being horribly card-choked by your opponent. So, whether you're desperate for shields, combat tricks, or any kind of integral combat piece, this is a pretty reasonable support. It's not expensive, so if you draw it, play it, and proceed to deploy stall your opponent at your discretion. Just make sure that you don't deprive yourself of too much of a standing army based by merit of flooding your hand with cards, as opposed to investing those same resources into your units. But last of our signature cards, we have 2 copies of an event, Inevitable Betrayal. It costs 2 resource tokens, has 1 printed shield icon, and also the tactic trait. It reads Reads action. Choose any number of undamaged enemy army units at a planet. Until the end of the phase, treat each of those units as if its printed text box were blank. So, this is an event with incredible potential dependent largely upon matchup. If you're fighting a large number of units which possess keywords or other kinds of card abilities, in one fell swoop, this allows you to negate those entirely. Plus, because you're choosing which specific text boxes to blank, any enemy units with built-in penalties you can simply leave as effective to continue to restrict them. For instance, you can allow ethereal envoys to continue to forced reaction retreat from your planet after attacking in battle, and you can continue to disallow your opponent's stalking Urgul from being able to deal attack damage to any of your undamaged army units or Warlord. So, as long as your most problematic enemy units are unwounded at the time of your playing this event, it allows you a fantastic opportunity to overcome otherwise insurmountable opposition. Honored Librarians will be freely attack targetable, and any Viorla marksmen or other printed ranged keyword units will no longer be able to kill off your army during the ranged skirmish round. Do note, however, that attachments and other card effects will still confer their conventional bonuses, so that same text box blanked marksman may not be able to fire its attached gun drones during the ranged skirmish round, but it will still be able to if left to survive until it has the opportunity to take a conventional combat turn. And similarly, if an opponent's units have gained an effect, such as preemptive barrage conferring the ranged keyword, then this event does nothing to blank out that effect, as text gained from any other source does not happen to be blanked per our rules reference guide. Still, there are innumerable other uses for Inevitable Betrayal, and it frankly strikes me as a reasonably stellar event. It prevents the direct damage from Zarathar's Flamers being sacrificed, and Rotten Plague Bearers become essentially useless. Any affected units even lose their associated traits for the duration of this effect. But do consider that this only lasts until the end of the phase and does only affect undamaged units. So, therefore, if a Gleeful Plague Beast ends up wounding our aforementioned Chaos units, then they will be able to take full advantage of their standard range of printed abilities. So, definitely an event with a significant bit of intrinsic power, especially considering it can affect any number of specifically chosen enemy army units. Plus, with Archon Selain Mourn, you hopefully won't ever be at a lack of card draw with which to come across this event, so that it can influence your decisive battle dramatically, and similarly, under anything approximating ideal conditions, you shouldn't be at a loss of resources for which to play this event. But before closing out our article, we also see a traditional card fan. In fact, it's the very same image we saw when Boundless Hate itself was first revealed. But as we now possess far more information about our upcoming cycle than we did at that time, let's run through these partial reveals and remind ourselves of what's coming out during Boundless Hate regardless. We have a Tyrannid support, the unique Sacalum Infestors, of which we can glean no significant additional information apart from once again noting it affects resource bonuses in some sense. And we're once again treated to seeing the artwork of the 4-cost Orc army unit, the Frontline Ardboys, which, beyond seeing a clear 2 printed command icons and no loyal icon, we know nothing about. But still, a significant number of command icons associated with any Orc faction unit is definitely something to look forward to. Next, we have the Prudent Fire Warriors, a common 2-cost Tau faction army unit, which happens to do something upon something leaving play, and before discussing our only fully unveiled card, we again see the near-complete reveal of our Neophyte Apprentice. For 1 cost, it's a Space Marine faction army unit with 1 command icon, no loyal icon, as well as the Soldier, Black Templars, and ally traits. It has forced reaction. After this unit damages an enemy unit by an attack, sacrifice it to search the top 6 cards of your deck for a Black Templars unit with cost 4 or lower. Put that unit into play at this planet and shuffle the remaining cards into your deck. So, we've discussed this card before, but despite not knowing its associated attack value or HP, it's almost certain to prove a fantastic means of thinning one's deck and essentially cheating more expensive Black Templar trait Space Marine units into play. Plus, it's another great example of the kind of ability you'd want to shut off if this unit has more than 1 hit point with our latest Warlord signature attachment, Last Breath. But with all partial reveals covered, our only full preview card is the aforeseen Eldar event, Mind War. It costs 1 resource, has 1 printed shield icon, and happens to have the power trait. It reads Action: exhaust a target non-elite army unit at a planet with a Psyker army unit you control. So, since first seeing this spoiler, we've had released 1 additional Psyker. In Decree of Ruin, we receive the Prophetic Farseer, which serves to deplete your opponent's deck of shields, and which could be a fantastic means of enabling your ability to exhaust an enemy unit through this event. And, as we've also seen spoiled our 6th Warpack's Warlord, the Eldar Taliesin Farinal, this could be another devious option to tap out an enemy unit, only to ensure that Taliesin's Warlocks could deliver a devastating double attack, hopefully striking for a whopping 4 damage twice, either all concentrated upon 1 unit, or otherwise split between 2 desirable targets. Still, all the same, Eldorath himself is, of course, a Psyker, and whether you're shutting off an opponent's ranged or area effect unit, or otherwise preventing them from making use of one of their formidable attackers, then for the cost of a mere resource, this event could be an entirely reasonable addition to either Warlord's existing deck and army. But now that we've reviewed our latest article in its entirety, this brings this Enslave the Masses review to a close. Please let me know in the comments what you think of Archon Selain Mour, our intriguing new Warlord from our upcoming 2nd Warpack of the Planetfall cycle. How does she compare to our existing Dark Eldar options, and how does she tentatively rank among the other Planetfall Warlords? Be sure to share your opinion below and tell me just what your wildest hopes and dreams are for our upcoming Dark Eldar Warlord throughout the rest of the Planetfall cycle of Warpacks. But, as always, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already, or if you are already subscribed, as ever, I always encourage you to share this content, as the more likes, the more views these videos receive. All of it stands to mean that more players are going to end up being exposed to Conquest. They may give the game a try, enjoy what they experience, end up joining our community, and of course, all together we continue to send the message to Fantasy Flight Games to continue to develop and support this fantastic product. If at any point you'd like to get in touch with me, I would encourage you to do so through Twitter or on Facebook, and if you ever feel so inclined to help support the Hive Tyrant, I would be honored were you to contribute to my Patreon. But once again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, be sure to check back in again soon for ever more Conquest LCG content to come.